Ambassador Chun Yara stood before the massive crystalline walls of the Confluence Station and felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. The station orbited Dalmara, the capital world of the oldest known civilization in the galaxy. And everywhere she looked, there were beings who had been traveling the stars since before humans had discovered fire too. 100 years had passed since humanity achieved faster than light travel. And in that time, they had learned one humbling truth. They were late to the party. The galactic confluence consisted of over 8,000 different species, some so ancient that their history stretched back millions of years. And humanity was classified as Category 3, barely worth a second glance. Chun walked through corridors made of living light, past beings that existed as pure energy, around massive creatures that communicated through gravitational waves. And she carried Earth's hopes on her shoulders like a weight that might crush Hera. Vex's collective representative floated toward her, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns that formed words in the air. Ambassador Chen, your petition for expanded territory has been reviewed. Chun straightened her back and met what she assumed were the creature's eyes. Though with the Vex, it was hard to tell. And the decision? The lights flickered, and what might have been amusement denied, as expected. Your species has existed for what? 10,000 years of recorded history. The youngest species in the confluence waited 50,000 years before receiving expanded borders. You must understand your place. Chun bit back a sharp reply and forced herself to nod. I understand. May I ask what humanity must do to prove ourselves worthy? Time, Ambassador. Simply exist long enough to prove you are not another. Flash in the pan species destined for extinction. The Vex drifted away, leaving Chun alone in the corridor with her frustration. She had been Earth's representative for 5 years now, and every day brought the same patronizing attitudes, the same dismissals, the same treatment like they were children playing at adult affairs back in her quarters. Chen reviewed reports from human colonies scattered across their small sector of space. 12 worlds, 40 stations, 200 billion people, all confined to a region of space that the elder races considered little more than a backwater. Screen chimed with an incoming message marked Urgent. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on the display, his face drawn and tired. Ambassador, we need to talk about the silence. Chum leaned forward. Webb ran the Prometheus station, a research outpost positioned at the very edge of human territory, where the galactic rim faded into the deep dark between galaxies. What have you found? Webb's hands moved across his console, sending her data files that made her eyes widen. 3 more stars have vanished in the past month. Not gone supernova, not collapsed, just vanished. All electromagnetic radiation from those systems has simply stopped. Chun had heard Webb talk about the silence before, a phenomenon he had been tracking for 2 years. Regions of space where stars disappeared from all sensors, where space itself seemed to become a void. The confluence scientists say it's equipment malfunction. Chun said carefully, the confluence scientists are wrong. Webb's voice carried a conviction that made Chun pay attention. We deployed our new probe yesterday, the one using mechanical observers instead of quantum sensors. Ambassador, there's something out there. Something big. He brought up an image that looked like nothing at first, just darkness. But as Chun stared, she began to see movement in the black, shapes that hurt to look at, things that seemed to exist outside normal space. What am I looking at? I don't know, Webb admitted, but whatever it is, it's consuming stars. We've tracked the pattern back 300 years. It's been happening slowly, methodically, and it's getting faster. Chun felt a chill run down her spine. How fast? At current rates, it'll reach inhabited systems in about 10 years. Maybe less. You need to present this to the Confluence Scientific Directorate immediately. Webb laughed, but there was no humor in it. I tried. They dismissed me in under 5 minutes. told me that humanity's tendency toward paranoia and pattern-seeking was causing us to see threats where none existed. The Krathani representative actually thanked me for the amusing diversion from real work. Chun closed her eyes and thought carefully. The Krathani were beings of pure consciousness who had transcended physical form over 1,000,000 years ago. And they considered themselves the wisest species in the galaxy if they dismissed Webb's findings. Convincing anyone else would be nearly impossible. "Send me everything you have," Chun said finally. "Every scrap of data, every analysis, every measurement. I'm going to dig through the Confluence archives. Looking for what? Anything that might support your findings. If this silence has been happening for centuries, maybe other species noticed it before." Webb nodded slowly. "Be careful, Ambassador. If I'm right about this, and the elder races refuse to listen." "I know," Chun interrupted. "But what choice do we have?" Over the next 3 weeks, Chun spent every free moment in the vast archives of the Confluence. The database contained records from thousands of civilizations spanning millions of years. And searching it felt like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach, but Chun had something the elder races didn't. Fresh eyes. She searched not for scientific records, but for cultural ones. Myths, legends, warnings passed down through extinct civilizations, and she found them. The Talver, extinct for 2,000,000 years, had left behind poems about the quiet ones who wait between the stars. The Nethera, gone for 800,000 years, had warnings carved into their last monuments about the darkness that hungers. The Prax, extinct only 50,000 years ago, had sent a final desperate message about those who silence the light. Dozens of civilizations, all extinct, all with similar warnings. The elder races had cataloged these as primitive superstitions, metaphorical references to natural phenomena, like black holes or stellar collapse, but Chun saw the pattern that millions of years of comfortable existence had blinded them to the extinct civilizations weren't speaking in metaphors they were trying to warn everyone about something real. Chun compiled her findings and requested an emergency session with the Confluence Council. They granted her 10 minutes. A courtesy extended only because refusing might seem rude. She stood before beings older than mountains and presented her evidence. Ambassador Trelanoth of the Dral Imperium, a massive reptilian creature covered in metallic scales, listened with what might have been patience. When Chun finished, silence filled the chamber. Then Trelanoth spoke, his voice like grinding stone. "Ambassador Chun, you present myths and legends as evidence. The Confluence has scanned these regions with instruments refined over millions of years. We have found nothing." A Krathani representative manifested as a glow of soft blue light. "Your species is young, prone to seeing patterns and threats where none exist. This is natural for primitive minds still driven by survival instinct. In time, you will learn to transcend such fears." Chun felt her frustration boiling over. What if you're wrong? What if your millions of years of stability have made you blind to real threats? The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence felt. Dangaru Stronth leaned forward. "You overstep, human. Return to your sector and leave such matters to those with the wisdom to understand them." Chun was dismissed back on Prometheus Station. Webb watched his monitors as another star system went dark. The silence was spreading, and no one was listening. Dr. Marcus Webb had stopped sleeping for 6 months now. He had watched the silence consume 17 star systems, and each time he sent reports to the Confluence. Each time he was ignored. His team aboard Prometheus Station worked around the clock, deploying probes, gathering data, trying to understand what they were facing. Commander Sarah Park, his second-in-command, brought him another cup of coffee. "You need to rest." "Marcus, I'll rest when we figure this out." Webb pulled up the latest scans from Probe Delta 7, the experimental unit they had built using what the elder races would consider laughably primitive technology instead of sophisticated quantum sensors that could detect individual particles across light years. They had used simple mechanical observers cameras, basically, paired with AI systems designed to mimic human intuition. The AI was based on neural patterns from Webb's own brain scans, which meant it thought like he did. Paranoid, pattern-seeking, and unwilling to ignore the impossible. What does Delta 7 show? Park pulled up the data stream. The probe had ventured deeper into the silence than any had before. Protected by thick mechanical shielding instead of energy barriers, its cameras showed nothing at first. Just the empty blackness of space where stars should have been. But then the AI flagged something movement in the darkness. Shapes that seemed to slide between dimensions. Things that existed in states human eyes weren't meant to perceive. Webb enhanced the images, filtering them through different spectrums in infrared. There was nothing in ultraviolet. Nothing but in a spectrum that existed between radio waves and visible light, in a frequency that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. The shapes became clear. They were massive, larger than planets, with geometries that hurt to look at. They moved through space like sharks through water, and wherever they went, stars vanished. My God, Park whispered. What are they? I don't know, Webb said, but they're real. They're organized. And they're hunting. He tracked the movement patterns. Feeding them into his AI, the entities moved with purpose, following patterns that suggested intelligence, coordinating their movements across light years as if communicating instantaneously. They were systematically consuming stars from the rim of the galaxy inward. And if Webb's calculations were correct, they had been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. We need better data, Webb said. I'm going to petition the Confluence Scientific Directorate again. Park gave him a look that said she thought he was wasting his time. But she didn't argue. Webb prepared his presentation with obsessive detail. He included every measurement, every scan, every piece of evidence his team had gathered. He showed the pattern of vanishing stars, the movement of the entities, the timeline that led inevitably toward populated space. Confluence Scientific Directorate granted him 30 minutes in front of their panel. Webb stood before beings whose understanding of physics made human knowledge look like counting on fingers. And he presented his case. When he finished, the head of the directorate, a being composed of crystallized thought, addressed him. Dr. Webb, your enthusiasm is noted, but your conclusions are fundamentally flawed. How? We have scanned these regions with quantum entangled sensor arrays capable of detecting gravitational fluctuations from single atoms. We have probed subspace, hyperspace, and dimensional folds beyond your current understanding. There is nothing there. Webb felt his frustration rising. And how do you explain the missing stars? Natural phenomena, stellar collapse, dimensional anomalies, quantum fluctuations. Your instruments are simply too primitive to detect the actual causes. A VEX representative joined in. Your use of mechanical observers and artificial intelligence is charming in its antiquity. But surely you understand that such crude methods cannot compete with our refined sensors. What if crude is what you need? Webb shot back. What if your advanced sensors are so sophisticated that they're filtering out what they think shouldn't exist? The chamber went quiet. The head of the directorate leaned forward. Dr. Webb, the Confluence has existed for over 10 million years. In that time, we have cataloged every known threat to galactic stability. We have faced stellar disasters, dimensional rifts, even reality warping anomalies. Do you truly believe your species, with your mere centuries of spaceflight, has discovered something we have missed? Yes, Webb said flatly, because we're still afraid of the dark. He was dismissed without further discussion back on Prometheus. Webb met with Ambassador Chun via secure channel. They won't listen, he told her. I know, Chun replied. But I found something in the archives. She shared what she had discovered. The warnings from extinct civilizations, the patterns of disappearance, the consistent references to darkness and silence. Webb felt something click into place. They've seen this before. More than that, Chun said. I think this has happened before, maybe multiple times. The silence consumes civilizations on timescales of millions of years, and the elder races have been stable for so long that they've forgotten what existential threats look like. So what do? Chum was quiet for a long moment. We prepare. If the confluence won't act, then humanity will. That's insane. We're one species, barely 200 years into space travel. What can we possibly do against something that consumes stars? I don't know yet, Chun admitted, but sitting and waiting for death isn't an option. She ended the call, leaving Webb alone with his monitors. 3 days later, everything changed. Probe Delta 7, still operating in the silence, detected a surge of activity. The entities were moving faster, converging on a single point in space. Webb watched in horror as they surrounded a star system on the very edge of inhabited space. The Kelth homeworld. The Kelth were a Category 5 civilization, younger than humanity, but established enough to have full confluence membership population. 40 billion. Webb immediately sent an emergency broadcast to the confluence, to the Kelth government, to anyone who would listen. This is Dr. Marcus Webb aboard Prometheus Station. The silence is attacking an inhabited system. Kelth Prime is in immediate danger. I repeat, Kelth Prime. The star went dark. Every sensor pointed at the Kelth system showed the same thing. Complete electromagnetic silence, no light. No radio, no quantum signatures. 40 billion lives. Snuffed out in an instant. Webb sat frozen at his console, unable to process what he had just witnessed within hours. The entire galaxy knew the confluence couldn't ignore it anymore, couldn't dismiss it as primitive paranoia or equipment malfunction. An entire civilization had vanished, and every sensor across the galaxy had recorded an ambassador. Chum contacted Webb again. They're convening an emergency session of the full Galactic Council. Will they listen now? They have to, Chun said, but her voice carried no confidence. The emergency session was chaos. Thousands of representatives screaming accusations, demanding explanations, calling for action or retreat or denial. Webb was called to testify, along with confluence scientists who have been studying the Kelth system's disappearance. The evidence was undeniable now. Something existed in the darkness between stars, something capable of consuming entire civilizations, and it was moving toward the heart of the galaxy. But even faced with proof, the elder races struggled to act. They had lived in peace for so long that the very concept of a threat they couldn't negotiate with or understand seemed impossible. Krathani representative proposed meditation and philosophical inquiry to understand the entity's purpose. The Vex suggested attempting communication through mathematical patterns. The Dral Imperium called for military action, but admitted their weapons were designed for peacekeeping, not warfare against extra-dimensional beings. Ambassador Chen listened to the debate spiral in circles, and she felt something she had never felt before: contempt for the wisdom of ages. These ancient species had grown soft, complacent, certain that their technology and philosophy could solve any problem, but some problems couldn't be negotiated with. Some threats required not wisdom but courage. Chum stood and requested recognition. When the chamber quieted, she spoke in a clear, firm voice. The confluence has debated for 6 hours while the silence continues to advance. At current speed, it will reach the next inhabited system in 3 months. While you discuss philosophy and attempt communication, billions more will die. What would you have us do, human? Trelanoth demanded. Fight, Chum said simply, or move. But do something. Your species knows nothing of galactic warfare. A Vex representative said. No, Chun agreed. But we know about survival. And right now, That's all that matters. The message went out across every human colony simultaneously. Every government received it. Every corporation. Every independent station and settlement scattered across humanity's small corner of the galaxy. President Maria Santos appeared on screens throughout human space. And her words were simple. 2 weeks ago, the Kelf civilization was destroyed. 40 billion lives ended in moments. The galactic confluence debates while the threat grows closer. Humanity will not wait for permission to survive. She announced Project Beacon for the first time in human history. Every nation on Earth agreed to a single-purpose. Resources from every colony were redirected. Every research facility retasked. Every military asset mobilized. They were going to turn their sun into a weapon. Dr. Webb was recalled from Prometheus Station to lead the scientific team. He stood in a bunker deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by the brightest minds humanity could gather, and explained what they needed to do. The entities exist partially outside normal spacetime, he said. Conventional weapons won't work because they simply slide around them. But our analysis shows they're vulnerable to specific types of radiation. What types? Asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's leading physicist. The kind produced by crude nuclear fusion, Webb replied. The kind our weapons still use. The room fell silent. Every species in the confluence had abandoned fusion weapons millions of years ago, moving to zero-point energy extraction and dimensional taps that were far more efficient and powerful. But those advanced technologies produced clean energy, radiation that existed purely in normal spacetime. Humanity's primitive fusion reactors, their barely controlled matter-antimatter reactions, produced radiation that splashed across multiple dimensional boundaries. So our backwardness is actually useful? Tanaka asked. More than useful, Webb said. It might be our only advantage. Project Beacon required them to build a stellar amplifier around Sol itself, using technology they barely understood. Borrowed and adapted from alien physics, they constructed massive arrays in solar orbit. The engineering was brutal construction. Crews worked in conditions that killed dozens daily. But volunteers kept coming. The timeline was impossible. They had 8 months before the silence reached the nearest human colony when news of Project Beacon leaked to the confluence. The response was immediate and harsh. The Galactic Council issued formal sanctions against Humanity Ambassador. Chen was summoned before the full assembly and accused of reckless endangerment. You propose to weaponize your star? Trelanoth roared. Do you have any idea what could happen if this fails? Yes, Chen replied calmly. Earth's solar system could be destroyed. We've run the calculations. There's a 40% chance of catastrophic failure. The chamber erupted in shocked disbelief. And you proceed anyway? A Kurthani representative asked, genuinely baffled. What choice do we have? Chen asked. The confluence won't act. The silence advances. We either fight or die waiting. This is the recklessness of youth, the Kurthani said. You lack the wisdom to understand the risks. Maybe, Chen admitted. But we also lack the cowardice to do nothing. The insult was deliberate. And it hit like a bomb. The elder races had never been called cowards before. Not in millions of years of recorded history. Ambassador Trelanoth stood to his full height, towering over Chen. You overstep, human. Do I? Chen met his gaze. 40 billion Kelf died while you debated. How many more will die while you continue to talk? She activated the holographic projector she had brought, filling the chamber with Webb's data. This is the silence's current position and trajectory. These are the inhabited systems in its path. In 6 months, the Vex colony of Thalon falls. In 8 months, the human colony of New Shanghai. In 10 months, a Droll fortress world. The projections continued, showing system after system falling dark. In 5 years, it reaches Thalmora. In 10 years, it reaches the galactic core. But please, continue debating philosophy while civilizations die. Chun closed the projector. Humanity is proceeding with Project Beacon. We've made our data freely available to any species that wants it. Prove us wrong, or help us survive. But we will not sit idle. She turned and walked out of the chamber, formally recalling all human diplomats from confluent stations behind her. The assembly sat in stunned silence back on Earth. Project Beacon entered its final phase. The stellar arrays were complete. Positioned in a perfect sphere around Solweb ran final calculations. Checking and rechecking every variable, President Santos stood beside him in the control center. What are our actual chances? Marcus? Webb didn't lie to her. 40% failure means Earth burns. 40% we just waste resources and time. 20% we actually damage the silence. Those aren't good odds. No, Webb agreed. But they're the only odds we have. Santos nodded. Slowly, then let's show the galaxy what humans do when cornered. The activation sequence began. Every human in the solar system was evacuated to Mars and the outer colonies. Those who couldn't evacuate accepted their fate. Webb's hands shook as he entered the final commands. The rays activated simultaneously, drawing power directly from Sol's core for 3 heartbeats. Nothing happened. Then the sun screamed. Light erupted from Sol in a coherent beam, focused and amplified by the arrays. Shooting across space toward the silence, the beam was visible from Earth even in daylight. A lance of impossible brightness cutting through the sky. Webb's sensors went wild, showing radiation readings that shouldn't exist, energy levels that violated every law of thermodynamics. The beam reached the silence after 4 hours. A distance that should have taken years at light speed, but this wasn't normal light. It existed partially outside spacetime, following paths that curved through dimensions humans couldn't perceive when the beam hit the silence. The universe itself seemed to scream. Every sensor across the galaxy recorded the same thing. Silence was no longer empty. Revealed in Sol's burning light were shapes beyond comprehension. Entities vast beyond measure. Things that existed in states between reality and unreality. They writhed in the being's touch, clearly in pain, and for the first time in recorded history, they reacted. The entities turned their attention fully toward the source of their agony. They began moving directly toward human space, not slowly harvesting stars, not methodically consuming systems one by one, but advancing as a unified force. They would reach human territory in 3 years. Webb watched the readings in horror. We woke them up, he whispered. President Santos gripped his shoulder. No, Marcus. We proved they exist. We proved they can be hurt. The broadcast went out across all frequencies. Human and alien, every species capable of receiving transmissions, saw what humanity had revealed. The cosmic conversation that had buzzed endlessly for millions of years. Trade negotiations, philosophical debates, diplomatic exchanges fell completely silent. Every civilization watched the same thing. The darkness between stars was alive. And it was hungry on Thalmora. The eldest Krathani consciousness in existence materialized before the Galactic Council. It had not manifested in physical space for over 1 million years. But it did so now. The humans were right. It said simply, we have grown blind in our comfort. Ambassador Trelanoth of the Drow Imperium stood. The Imperium demands humanity be destroyed for this recklessness. They have doomed us all. But a new voice spoke up. Ambassador Kresh of the Zan, a warrior species that had been suppressed by the confluence for centuries for being too aggressive. The humans have given us a chance, Kresh said. They showed us the enemy. They proved it can be fought. At what cost? Trelanoth demanded. Survival, Kresh replied. Or would you prefer comfortable extinction? The Galactic Council dissolved into chaos, species taking sides, alliances forming and breaking, But one thing was certain: the cosmos had fallen silent before humanity's defiance, and nothing would ever be the same on Earth. Chung received a message on a private channel. It was from the Kruthani representative who had dismissed her months ago. The message was 3 words: "Teach us courage." Chun looked at the sun, still burning brighter than it had in billions of years, and she smiled. Now, they're listening. The Dural Imperium fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. 200 warships, each larger than a city, their weapons charged and ready. Admiral Kothtar commanded the fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought that had never known defeat. His orders were clear: eliminate the human threat before they doomed the entire galaxy on Earth. Warning sirens screamed across every settlement. President Santos stood in the command center, watching the Drow fleet take up attack positions. "Time until they're in firing range?" she asked. 40 minutes, replied General Harrison Chen, the ambassador's younger brother. "And our defense fleet?" Harrison didn't meet her eyes. "Ma'am, we have 60 ships. Most are converted cargo vessels." "Against the Drow Imperium." "I know," Santos interrupted. "Contact Ambassador Chun. Tell her it's time." Chun was already in transit, aboard a diplomatic shuttle, racing toward the confrontation. Behind her shuttle came something the Drow hadn't anticipated: 300 ships from 24 different species. The Zan warrior fleet led the formation, their vessels bristling with weapons that the confluence had forced them to keep dormant for centuries. Behind them came the Sylph, aquatic beings whose homeworld lay directly in the Silence's path. Their bioships grown rather than built. Smaller contingents from young species across the galaxy joined them, species that the elder races had dismissed as primitive or irrelevant. They called themselves the Terran Compact, and they positioned themselves between Earth and the Drow fleet. Admiral Kothtar watched the approaching ships with something resembling disbelief. "They dare?" He growled. His second-in-command, a younger Drow named Vesh, studied the formation. "Admiral, the Zin alone have firepower comparable to our fleet. Combined with the others, I see them," Kothtar snapped. "Open a channel to their flagship." Ambassador Chun appeared on his screen moments later. "Admiral Kothtar, I'm glad you could join us. You mock me, human." Kothtar's voice was ice. "You have condemned the galaxy with your recklessness. We come to end this threat before you destroy us all. The only threat is the silence." Chun replied calmly. "We've proven it exists. We've proven it can be heard. Destroy us and you lose your only weapon against it." "Lies and desperation," Kothtar said. "You woke a sleeping enemy. You turned its attention toward inhabited space. 40 billion Kelth died before you acted. How many more will die because of you?" Chun's expression hardened. How many died while the confluence debated? How many more would have died if we had done nothing? "The silence was always coming, Admiral. We just made it visible. You should have let us handle it. You had millions of years to handle it." Chun shot back. "You didn't. You dismissed the warnings. You ignored the evidence. You were too comfortable in your ancient wisdom to see the truth." She leaned forward. "We made the data freely available. Admiral, your scientists have had 3 months to study it. Tell me, what have they found?" Kothtar's silence was answer enough. "Nothing," Chun continued, "because your technology is too advanced to see what's right in front of you. You filter out the impossible and miss the real threats." She activated a holographic display. "But we found something else. Admiral, the entities are vulnerable to specific radiation frequencies, the kind our primitive weapons produce." The display showed Webb's latest research. Analysis of the beam's effect on the silence entities. "Our crude technology hurts them. Your refined weapons won't. So you have 2 choices. Destroy the species that can fight this threat, or help us build more weapons." Kothtar studied the data, his tactical mind warring with his orders. This could be deception. It could be, Chun agreed. But ask yourself, what do we gain by lying? We're one small species facing the combined might of the Drow Imperium. If we wanted to survive, we'd surrender. Instead, we're offering to share our weapon. She gestured to the compact fleet surrounding her. These species understand what you don't yet, Admiral. Survival requires action, not debate. Courage, not caution. Kotar was silent for a long moment finally. He spoke. If I stand down, the Confluence will call it cowardice. Then let them, Chun said. We'll call it wisdom. The standoff lasted 3 hours. Gother consulted with his commanders, debated with his officers, and finally made his decision. The Drow fleet withdrew without firing a shot. They didn't join the compact, but they didn't oppose it either. Chun allowed herself one moment of relief. Before getting back to work, the compact needed to be more than a defensive alliance. It needed to be a fighting force. She met with the representatives of every compact species aboard Prometheus Station, which had been converted into their headquarters. Commander Kresh of the Zhen slammed his fist on the table. The silence will reach my homeworld's outer colonies in 2 years. We need weapons now, not debates. We're working on it, Webb said. Surrounded by data screens, we've started construction on 3 more beacon arrays using stars in Zun, Sylph, and Terran space. 3? A Sylph representative, her name unpronounceable in human speech, expressed frustration through color changes on her skin. The silence advances on 1,000 fronts. 3 beacons won't stop it. 3 is all we can build with current resources, Webb replied. Each beacon requires materials we don't have in abundance, expertise we're still developing, and time we're running out of. Chun studied the tactical displays. Then we need to slow the silence down. Buy ourselves time to build more weapons. How? Kresh demanded. Our conventional weapons are useless against it. Webb pulled up new data. Not entirely useless. The silence entities avoid areas with high concentrations of matter. They prefer the empty space between stars. If we create barriers, dense fields of asteroids, debris, anything physical, we can channel their movement, turn them into choke points, Chun said, understanding. Force them into kill zones where our beacons can target them. Exactly. Planning took weeks. The compact's combined knowledge of physics, engineering, and tactics came together in ways no single species could have managed. Humans provided the strategic framework. Used to thinking about warfare on scales the peaceful elder races had forgotten, the Zen offered their warrior traditions. Battle tactics refined over thousands of years. The Sylph contributed their understanding of organic materials, showing how to grow barrier fields from engineered organisms. Young species across the compact added their own innovations, approaches that ancient species had dismissed as crude or inefficient. And then the Krathani arrived, not the full civilization, but a single representative. The ancient consciousness that had manifested before the Galactic Councilate appeared at Prometheus Station without warning. A glow of blue light that coalesced into something resembling a human form. We wish to learn, it said to Chun. Learn what? How to see with young eyes again. How to feel fear. How to fight. Chun studied the ancient being. The Confluence sent you to spy on us. No, the Krathani said. I came because I am ashamed. For 1,000,000 years, I have existed in contemplation and philosophy. I thought this made me wise. Instead, it made me blind. It gestured to the compact members working around them. You are all so young, so afraid, so driven by survival instinct. I dismissed this as primitive. Now I see it is the only thing that matters. So you want to join us? I want to trade, the Krathani replied. My knowledge of dimensional physics for your knowledge of courage. Chun smiled. Deal. The Krathani's knowledge changed everything, combined with human ingenuity, Zun aggression, and Sylph biological expertise. They developed new weapon systems that could hurt the silence, not just beacons, but mobile platforms that could project the same hostile radiation fighters that could dart into the silence and strike at the entity's directly minds. That could create dimensional disruptions the entities couldn't easily avoid within 6 months. The compact had grown to over 500 species, some joined for protection, others for revenge against an enemy that had destroyed their colonies, but all joined because they had learned what the elder races had forgotten. Sometimes survival requires more than wisdom, it requires the willingness to fight. Admiral Koftar watched the compact's military exercises from his flagship and felt something he had never experienced. Doubt. The Dural Imperium was the strongest military force in the confluence. But what he saw disturbed him. The compact fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They were aggressive, innovative, willing to take risks that no confluence military would consider. And they were effective. He opened a private channel to Ambassador Chen. I wish to discuss terms. Terms for what, Admiral? For joining your Terran compact. Chen kept her expression neutral. The Dural Imperium serves the confluence. The confluence is dying, Koftar said bluntly. It cannot adapt, cannot fight, cannot survive what is coming. The compact can. This isn't about survival, Admiral. It's about how we choose to face the end. Koftar nodded slowly. Then I choose to face it fighting. 2 years after Project Beacon activated, the silence reached the Rim Territory's ambassador. Chun stood in the compact's war room aboard Prometheus Station and watched the tactical displays. Update and real-timed markers showed where the entities had emerged from. The darkness blue markers showed compact defensive positions. The markers collided at the edge of the galaxy. All beacons report ready. Webb announced from his station. They had 13 now, positioned around stars across compact space. Each one was operated by a different species who had adapted the crude human technology to their own understanding. Defensive fleets in position? Chun asked. General Harrison Chun, now commanding all compact military forces, nodded. 5,000 ships across 20 systems. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Chun took a breath. Then let's see if this works. Activate the barrier plan across the rim. Compact ships began their coordinated dance. They had spent months seeding the space between stars with debris fields, asteroid clusters, and engineered organisms that grew into vast webs of organic matter. Now those barriers activated, creating channels that forced the silence entities toward prepared kill zones. The entities didn't slow. They moved through the barriers like water, sliding around obstacles, consuming what they could, ignoring what they couldn't, but they were channeled, directed toward the 13 points where beacons waited. Chun watched one of the kill zones on her display, Sector 7, where a Zun beacon orbited a blue giant star. Commander Kresh commanded the defense there personally. His voice came through on the command channel. Entities entering range. Energy signatures match predictions. Firing beacon in 3, 2, 1. The blue giant screamed light. The beam lanced out, powered by the star's fusion heart, amplified by arrays built from human designs and Xeon engineering. It hit the first entity dead center. The thing writhed, its extra-dimensional form collapsing into normal space as the radiation burned it. For the first time in recorded history, one of the silence entities died across the war room. A cheer went up. Chun allowed herself a moment of hope. Then the entities adapted. The second entity hit by Kresh's beacon shifted its form, existing more fully outside normal spacetime, and the beam passed through it with reduced effect. The third entity simply avoided the beam entirely. Its movement too fast for the beacon to track. They're learning, Webb said, horror in his voice. Then we adapt too, Chun replied. All beacons switched to pulse mode. Don't give them time to adjust. The beacons changed their firing patterns. No longer sustained beams, but rapid bursts from multiple angles. It helped. But not enough. The entities kept coming at Sector 3. A Sylph beacon managed to kill 2 entities before the others overwhelmed the position. Organic ships fought with desperate courage, ramming the entities when weapons failed. The Sylph homeworld's outer colonies went dark at Sector 12. A human-operated beacon burned so hot it destabilized its star. The resulting explosion took out 7 entities, but also destroyed the entire system. 30 billion lives lost in an instant. Chun watched it happen and forced herself to keep functioning. This was war, and war demanded sacrifice, but not all the news was bad at Sector 7. Commander Kresh discovered something crucial. His fleet had been fighting the entities with every weapon they had. Fusion bombs, antimatter missiles, even primitive kinetic projectiles. Most did nothing, but the old Zan nuclear weapons, relics from before they joined the confluence, actually hurt the entities. The weapons were crude, inefficient, producing radiation that more advanced species had learned to filter out. But that crude radiation existed across dimensional boundaries. All ships, Chun broadcast across every compact frequency. Conventional weapons are ineffective. Switch to fusion-based armaments. Nuclear, antimatter, anything that produces raw high-energy radiation. The compact fleet scrambled to adapt. Ships that had been refitted with advanced energy weapons switched back to older, simpler designs. It felt like going backwards, abandoning millions of years of technological progress for primitive explosives. But it worked. The entities began to fall, not easily, not quickly, but they fell. The battle lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of constant fighting across 20 systems. The compact lost 2,000 ships. The entities consumed 17 worlds, but the first wave was stuck. Chun stood in the war room, exhausted beyond measure, and watched the last entity retreat back into the darkness around her. The surviving compact representatives looked equally worn. Did we win? Someone asked. Webb pulled up long-range scans. The silence is withdrawing, pulling back beyond the galactic rim. But it's not gone. It's regrouping. How long until they return? Chun asked. Impossible to say. Years, decades, maybe centuries. But they will return. Chun nodded slowly. Then we use the time we have. Build more beacons, develop better weapons, recruit more species. She looked around the room. This was just the first battle. The real war is going to last generations. In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. The galactic confluence formally dissolved. Some elder species retreated to their core worlds, building shields and barriers, hoping to hide from the silence. Others fled entirely, taking colony ships toward nearby galaxies, abandoning the Milky Way, but many stayed and joined the compact. The Korthani brought their dimensional knowledge. The Vex contributed their understanding of energy manipulation. Even some Drow, including Admiral Kothtar, joined permanently. The compact reformed as the Galactic Assembly, with a new charter that Chun herself drafted. It honored both the wisdom of age and the courage of youth. It valued caution and action in equal measure. It recognized that survival required both. Philosophy and war for Earth became its headquarters, not because humans demanded it, but because the other species insisted. Humanity had shown them how to fight, and they wanted that spirit at the heart of their government. Chun was elected first speaker of the assembly. She accepted reluctantly, knowing the weight it carried on her first day in office. She visited Mars. The world had been evacuated during the battle and was slowly being recolonized. Chun went to see the monument they had built. There it listed the names of everyone who had died in the war so far. 40 billion Cal 30 billion from the destroyed human system, 17 worlds worth of Sylph, Zan, and dozens of other species. The list went on for kilometers. Chun stood before it, and made a promise. This war isn't over. The silence will return. But when it does, we'll be ready. We'll fight. And we'll make sure every name here means something. Back on Prometheus Station, Webb continued his research. He studied the entities they had killed, analyzing their structure. Trying to understand what they were, his findings disturbed him. Entities weren't just consuming stars for energy. They were consuming reality itself, breaking down ordered matter and converting it back to primordial chaos. Why? He asked the Kfirthani representative, who often visited his lab. Perhaps because that is their nature. The Krithani replied, just as building and creating is ours. We impose order on chaos. They return order to chaos. Neither is right or wrong. Both simply are. So this war will never end? All things end eventually, the Krithani said. But some things are worth fighting for while they last. Webb thought about Earth, about humanity's brief history among the stars, about the compact they had built. Yeah, he agreed. I guess they are. 5 years after the first battle, Chun addressed the full Galactic Assembly. It was the anniversary of the day the silence had been revealed. The day the cosmos fell silent before humanity's defiance. We've had 5 years of peace, she said. We've used them well. 50 beacons now protect our borders. Our fleets are stronger. Our weapons more effective. We've welcomed 300 new species into the assembly. She paused, but the silence is still out there. Our long-range sensors detect movement at the galactic rim. The entities are gathering again. A murmur ran through the assembly. When they come, it will be worse than before. They've learned from the first battle. They'll be prepared. She looked out at the thousands of representatives from across the galaxy, ancient species and young ones. Warriors and philosophers, beings of matter and energy and pure thought. But so are we, she continued. We've learned something the silence can never understand. We're stronger together than apart. We fight not just for survival, but for each other. Chun activated a holographic display showing their current defensive positions. The new beacons, the fleet formations. The elder species once told me that humanity's fear and paranoia were weaknesses, signs of our primitive nature. They were wrong. Fear makes us vigilant. Paranoia makes us prepared. She smiled, and together, we've reminded the galaxy what it means to face the darkness with courage. The assembly erupted in approval cheers. Light patterns. Gravitational waves of agreement from species that communicated in ways humans couldn't quite perceive. Chun let it wash over her, then raised her hand for silence. The silence thinks we're prey. It thinks reality is something to be consumed and forgotten. It thinks the light of consciousness is temporary, meaningless. She looked directly at the cameras broadcasting to every world in the assembly. Let's prove it wrong. Deep in the darkness beyond the galactic rim, the entities stirred. They had felt pain for the first time in their existence. They had learned that the ordered matter they consumed could fight back, and they were gathering their full strength for a war that would span millennia, but in the light of billions of stars. On thousands of worlds across the galaxy, life prepared to me.